And the first thing that I absolutely need to talk about, because I am very passionate about this, is what happened with Clayton Kershaw yesterday. Clayton Kershaw was throwing a perfect game and was pulled after 7 innings. 7 innings, perfect game, 80 pitches. He had thrown 80 pitches and he was pulled. Now, the whole baseball world was talking about this. Why would he be pulled? Of course he was pulled. It ranged from all over the place. Here's my opinion. You got to let the man go back out and have a chance to throw the 24th perfect game in the history of Major League Baseball. There have been over 220,000 baseball games played in Major League Baseball. And only 23 times have we ever seen a perfect game. And now you have an all-time great, a guy that is considered a top 10 pitcher of all time, who has accomplished everything under the sun. An MVP, Cy Young Award, a World Series, plenty of All-Star games. The accolades go on. But he hasn't thrown a perfect game. And now he's 6 outs away from doing it. And he gets pulled because it's his first start of the year. He wasn't built up. He hadn't thrown the pitches. So you pull him when he's 6 outs away. I struggle with this. Dave Roberts ultimately made the decision to pull him. Now let me also say this. If Clayton Kershaw went into the dugout and said, "Hey, take me out, I'm done," fine. I wholeheartedly believe that that was not said. And we have not heard of any reason to believe that that was said. This was Dave Roberts' decision. Clayton Kershaw, being the pro that he is, just backed him up in the media and said, yeah, it was the right call. Those are selfish goals, Kershaw said after the game. We're trying to win. That's really all we're here for. I would have loved to have stayed, but bigger things, man. Bigger things. Saying the right things is Clayton Kershaw. Let me tell you a fact. This isn't an opinion. It's a fact. Clayton Kershaw had a chance to throw a perfect game. He was 6 outs away from it when he was pulled after 7 innings. That has only been done twice in the history of baseball. Only 2 times ever. Since 1901 has a pitcher thrown 7 perfect innings and been taken out of the game. The manager for both of them was Dave Roberts. He was the manager for both. Rich Hill in 2016 and Clayton Kershaw yesterday. Look, I just don't understand. I don't understand, one, how you're not scratching and clawing to go back out there. I just don't understand that. I would have just gone back out on the field no matter what. But ultimately, Kershaw respects his manager. Totally understand that. Now let's talk about the logistics of it. He had thrown 80 pitches. He hadn't been built up yet. He hadn't thrown over 80 pitches since last year. You're 6 outs away. You have a low pitch count. You're Clayton Kershaw. If this was a top prized prospect, you know what? I understand. He hadn't been built up. You don't want him to get hurt. Not that you want Clayton Kershaw to get hurt, but he is Clayton Kershaw. He's one of the greatest to ever do it. And the one thing in his career that he hasn't done is throw a perfect game. Let him go back out there. You're up 7-0, by the way. I don't care if you have to go out there and throw lollipops. Just give him a chance. Say, hey, Clayton, I want you to be done. You were going to be pulled, but since this is a perfect game, just go out there and throw 50%, 75%. Try and get outs. The second you give up a hit or walk a guy, we're going to take you out. I don't care what you have to do. Just give him the chance to do it. He didn't get the chance. Baseball fans were robbed of the chance to see history. That's what this game is built off of. That's what the game of baseball is built off of, is moments, is history. This would have been that. This would have been a fantastic moment in history, and it was taken away. Now, I also want to say that I do understand. I understand the thought behind pulling him. I absolutely do. He's not built up. You want to win a World Series. Dave Roberts himself went on record just a couple of weeks ago and claimed that they were going to win the World Series. But certain situations, you just got to let your guy go. You just got to understand the moment. Go up to Clayton Kershaw, look him in the eyes, and say, I want to pull you right now, but I also want to give you this opportunity to go do this. And if he says, I want to go do it, let him go do it. That's my opinion on all this.
I hear you, Ben. But would you feel the same way if this was a no-hitter and not a perfect game?
No, no, absolutely not. If this was a no-hitter, we're talking about a totally different story here. This wasn't a no-hitter. There have been plenty of no-hitters in history, and not to diminish a no-hitter. No-hitter is fantastic. It is incredible. But there have been 23 perfect games in history. And we were 6 outs away. You know, the Rich Hill one that happened when Dave Roberts pulled him a few years ago, he was over 100 pitches through 7. Well, I mean, he would have had to throw 150 plus pitches to complete that perfect game. But we were at 80 pitches here. And we're also speaking about this as if Clayton Kershaw went back out there, he was going to get injured. That's just not the case. We can't sit here and say he was going to get injured. And the risk, whatever it may be, he had thrown 80 pitches. He's thrown 100 plus a million times in his career. And he wasn't built up. I understand that. Let him go out. This is my whole thing here. Let him go out and just throw lollipops. And if he gives up a hit, if he walks the first batter of that 8th inning, pull him out. He's done. He's done for the day. Fantastic outing. Clayton Kershaw is back. He's one of the best of all time. He's back for the Dodgers. Wow, this is great for them. Just give him the opportunity.
I completely get it. As a competitor yourself, like, what are your thought process in a situation like that? If you're on the mound, you're throwing a game like that, do you go to Dave Roberts and say, "I need the ball. Do not take this from me"?
If I was on the mound that day, and I don't want this to seem like I do not know the conversation that went on in the dugout. I just don't. I'm sure there was a conversation between Kershaw and Dave Roberts. He probably said something like, "Hey, you're done." And I don't know. I don't know what the talk was. I know myself personally, and there's no way I'm coming out of that game. If you're Clayton Kershaw, you are a legend. You are an all-time great. You certainly have the ability, in my opinion, to go back out there or to just say, hey, I'm going to go back out there. So I don't know what was said. Maybe he wasn't feeling good anymore. And then that's a totally different conversation. But he didn't come out and say, yeah, I wanted out of that game. What he came out and said was, I think the right call was made. Those are two different things. And if you really want to tell everybody what you were thinking, if you really didn't want to go back out there, you would have said, yeah, you know, it was my first start. I really wasn't feeling good anymore, and I wanted out. But that's not what was said. It wasn't said at all. So I would have gone back out there. There's not I remember this story from a couple years ago when Justin was in Detroit, and he knew that Jim Leland was going to want to take him out of the game. He knew it. So what he did was he walked down the steps at the other end of the dugout and wouldn't even look at his manager because he wanted to go back out there. That was hysterical. He still ended up getting pulled, and Jim Leland was not happy about it. Not happy. But one tweet that I saw that I wanted to mention, because I think it involves a totally different conversation that I do want to have, was this from Jason Martinez. He said, hot take alert, but I do believe this. As a diehard Dodger fan, I would rather have seen Kershaw throw a perfect game than to win a World Series this year. Sandy's perfect game, as in Sandy Koufax's perfect game in 1965, is more discussed and remembered than the 1959, 63, 65 and 81 Dodger championships combined. So he is saying he would have rather seen Kershaw throw a perfect game this year than for his team that he is a diehard fan of to win the World Series.
Which brings up the great point. What's more important, individual success or team success?
Well, look, I think a big part of this exact scenario, is that the Dodgers won a World Series just a couple of seasons ago. In 2020, they won the World Series. They have been a great baseball team for a long time. So this begs the question of like, well, what do you care more about? Are you more of a fan of the players on the team, or do you want your team to win a world championship? And I think it does matter. I don't think he says this if he didn't get to see a Dodgers World Series just a couple of years ago. I really don't. I look at a team like yours, Conrad, the Seattle Mariners, who have the longest playoff drought in all of baseball. You're telling me that a Mariners fan would rather see Robbie Ray this year, friend of the pod, throw a perfect game instead of them win a World Series? I'm not buying that. I'm not buying that at
I
all.
could go for 3 perfect games in the same season, and that still would not equate to a World Series championship, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's what matters. I think if your team has won something recently, that's still always there. You have that. You have the World Series. But it really does just bring up an interesting question, and a question that I would honestly have for all fans. I can't sit here right now and tell you, because with what I do, I root for players around the league. I don't have one team that I root for. I don't have one diehard team that I live and die by. So, of course, I can sit here and say, yeah, I want to see a perfect game. But it does bring up an interesting question. And according to Jason Martinez, he would rather see a perfect game. It is something that has only been done 23 times in the history of the game. And it's something that I swallow to be okay with, because Dave Roberts is the only manager in history to have done this. It's only happened twice, and both times it's been Dave Roberts pulling a starting pitcher after 7 perfect innings, being 6 outs away. So yeah, I'm pretty passionate about this, and I do want to say I understand taking him out. I understand the thought process behind it. But this isn't this young rookie. This isn't a guy that is 20 years old and you need to save him forever. This is Clayton Kershaw. And I think the game of baseball owed it to Kershaw to allow him to go do this. Kershaw spoke after the game about this when asked about it, and he said, I feel bad for my catcher. To me, that says everything you need to know. He feels bad for his catcher. Well, he wanted to go back out there. I feel robbed. I feel robbed of the attempt to watch a perfect game go down. So yeah, pretty passionate about that. Kershaw pulled after 7 innings. One of the biggest topics of the week, certainly. I think this is going to be a big topic in the game of baseball when all is said and done. Thanks for watching. If you love flipping bats, swinging 3-0, or just talking ball, join us. Call us at 213-537-9339 with your questions. We have a weekly guest, and we have a lot of fun, so hit that subscribe button.